Welcome, Title Tribe. It is George Reed with Toilets and Titles, bringing you TGIF. As you can see, Justin is not here this week. He's actually out. He's at the doctor's right now, believe it or not. And I know he had big shoes to fill, so I reached out to my good friend here, Dr. Jesse Morse from the Fantasy Doctors. He agreed to come on the show, and we're going to get into this and talk a little bit about injuries here in just a minute. I love that intro. I chuckle every time on the inside when it pops up as Nurse Justin. That gets me warm and fuzzy on the inside every time. So, Dr. Morris, before we jump in here, why don't you go ahead, take a moment, talk to the people, explain your background, where they can follow you, any work that you're currently working on, and all that stuff.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Dr. Jesse Morris. I'm a sports medicine physician in Miami. I specialize in quote unquote stem cells or regenerative medicine, kind of injections more so than surgery. Do a ton of injury analysis. I own or part owner of the Fantasy Doctors, where we do all of our content, combination of videos or just tweets, injury spreadsheets, full injury histories, a bunch of cool stuff. We're working on if you go into fantasydoctors.com, at this point in time, you can search for pretty much any offensive player injury history. But what we're working on is to be searchable. So you could say like high ankle sprain, and everybody in our injury history that has a high ankle sprain or had one, it will pop up. So it takes a while to program that. So we're working on that. There may be some AI involved in the future. I think it'd be pretty cool. And then we're working on a couple other cool things. I'm working on an Achilles list right now because the spike seems crazy. So I'm working on that to see and the grind is real. There's 80 players or something like that on my list right now. And some of the guys I've pretty much pulled off already. So it's crazy. Everyone's injured. It just depends on how injured they are. I put out a tweet the other day saying, I think 17 of the 32 starting quarterbacks have already been injured at some capacity already this season, which is insane. You got guys like Clayton Tune and Jaron Hall potentially starting this week with Aiden O'Connell. Just like it's crazy. So injuries are unfortunately part of the game, and they've decimated our squads. And if you don't have a significant injury, you are unbelievably lucky. It didn't have anything to do with draft position. Look at Justin Jefferson. But are there some guys that are a little bit more injury, quote unquote, prone or tendency to get injured than others? Look at your Deebo Samuels. But we're here to kind of read between the lines to give you an idea of how injured these guys are based on what we know, what we understand, and the information we have at our disposal.
Yeah. So like you nailed it. If unfortunately we didn't turn off the injuries for the NFL season this year, it seems worse this year than previous years. Although I feel like we say that every single year that It's worse this year than the previous, even though I don't know if it's factual or not, but it's probably close to being about the same.
At the end, I think the concussions were up. I don't have to look to see if they're up or down, but they weren't a whole lot different than in preseason. But they don't have the early season, and there's so much every week. It's just a grind. Like even a month ago, I don't remember what the injury report was because I'm updating it every day. So like unless I copied it every week and just put it away, there's no way I would be able to remember it.
I know it went from 84 2 weeks ago down to like 60 something last week. And then the injury report from the fantasydoctors.com, which is, as everybody who's watching the show knows, every week we always plug fantasydoctors.com. That's where Justin and I get our injury information from. It's up to 80 again this week. So it's insane.
And some of the guys I pull off just to say it, like they're probably still dealing with it. Like I'll give you an example. DeAndre Hopkins is probably still dealing with high ankle sprain, but I've already moved on to a new injury regarding his toe. Like, there's only so many I can put on there. And most of these guys are going to play through them. It's like, maybe concussions, like you could say, all right, he's moved on from his concussion, but some of these things, like, they're still dealing with them, but I can't list everyone. So it's like, you have to pull off guys that are probably okay, but they're being impacted a little bit, but they're really not much of a question. So you don't really think about it. But, our Wednesday night summary show is just kind of ridiculous, because it's just like, who is the most injured? Like, you can't just go through every one, because it's like an hour and a half long. You just can't do it. So you kind of have to pick and choose. This week's actually pretty clear, pretty straightforward. There's a couple question marks. We'll go through those guys, but I mean, there's other weeks that we don't know which way. CMC that 1 week, and some of the guys that the Achan was he going to go to IR, and what's going on with Kyler. So there's some question marks, and there's other ones like, oh yeah, it's black or white. Unfortunately, he's done, or he's fine, or whatever. Yeah,
there's that Kirk Cousins. Okay, we know for a fact. Unfortunately, tore his Achilles. He's done for the year.
Yep.
So, all right, let's jump into some of these players. So we'll start off with probably the most important position on the field, quarterbacks. We got Matthew Stafford. He's dealing with a right thumb injury, most likely a UCL sprain. What can you tell us about a UCL sprain? How will that affect him if he does play this week?
So the important thing is two things to know about this injury. First of all, this is a very common injury in quarterbacks, because this is the injury. This is the ligament that holds this part of the thumb together. That's responsible for gripping, which obviously is very important in a throwing quarterback and his throwing hand. This is the second time he's injured that we know of. The first time, I think it was in 20 or 21. I always screw up the years. And he had a partial tear during the season. He had surgery on off season to basically either suture it back together or create a new one. That's likely why he didn't tear it this time, because it has hardware on there to protect it from tearing. But he did sprain the heck out of it, and that's why it's tough. Now, two things to make note of. One is that they have a bye next week.
Yep.
The second thing is, you're like, well, why don't you just shut him down for a week? That's not who Stafford is. His injury history is the craziest thing you will ever see. Literally, look at it. It's like 10 pages long. It's friggin' bananas. So he's not the type of guy who will – he's like DeAndre Hopkins. He's like Evans. He's like the guy – they will play unless they can't play. Like, it's just not safe for them to play. So it would not surprise me if he plays. That doesn't mean he could make 3 plays and leave. Like, technically that's a start, but I don't expect a whole lot out of him. Puka's banged up. Cooper Kupp has been pretty much irrelevant the past 2 weeks, regardless of anything. So, I think this is a tough injury. I think he got lucky, and he didn't have a full tear. But I think it's going to bother him for at least a week or two, enough to say, hey, can we confidently trust him? So you have to be careful with not only with him, but with the receivers this week.
Okay. Next one we got is Deshaun Watson. He's got the subcapularis. Is that how that's pronounced?
Subscap. Yep.
I'm impressed myself here. Re-injury. I guess he returned too soon. Can you explain what he should not have played last week,
or 2 weeks ago, or whatever week it was?
Yeah, it was a couple of weeks ago. All I know is I started him, and because everybody said he was playing, and then he did not play.
No, I was like, God, no. And I think he meant it yesterday or whatever day it was. He's like, yeah, I didn't listen to them, and I tried to play. And so here's the problem. The subscap is this one right here, which is kind of the front of the shoulder. So the subscap is responsible for a lot of things. But think of this, the easiest way to think of this one is kind of grabbing a seatbelt. So this kind of across your shoulder. Now, it actually attaches to the inside or front of the shoulder blade. And it's kind of like almost like a coil where it coils up. And when you throw, you need that to coil up and launch. So the problem is he probably had a grade 2 strain or a bad grade 1. And every time you're trying to throw, this is painful. You cannot put enough velocity in there and touch and everything, and then do it again, and then do it again, and do it again, and do it again. You can't do it. So these take about 4 to 6 weeks to calm down. I mean, I would be surprised if you get stem cells or PRP or something in there like I would do, because this is not something that you can surgically repair and have them come back in the same season. It's not. So I did one of these yesterday. They do really well, but in general, they take time to heal, right? I'm actually a little surprised he's playing this week. I thought he would need another week. I still don't trust him for what it's worth. He'll be better than he was 2 weeks ago. If you're in a pinch and you have to start Amari Cooper, you have to start, maybe Elijah Moore and Njoku, who's banged up with an ankle, but he's going to play. Then, okay, fine. He's going to be better than 2 weeks ago. But I still don't really have a whole lot of faith in him until I see him do and he's got a great matchup, right? This is a fantastic matchup. So maybe it's a little bit of a softball. Now, on the other side of the ball, we might get Kyler back. He is traveling with the team. They have not ruled him out. He is off the injury report from his ACL. This could be, if you were to rewind 2 years, a crazy matchup between Deshaun Watson and Kyler Murray. Obviously, both are post-injury now, so it's a little bit different. Yep. But we could see Kyler come back here. It's very possible that it's either this week or next week. I don't know which one it's going to be. But in general, this is a tough matchup, right? Cleveland is really good. They have, in my opinion, the best defense in the league.
That's one of the best for sure.
They're really good. So they're going to make it tough. They're going to make his life tough. I mean, very tough. But Kyler's not going to have the same running ability that he normally does. That's the problem. Yes, he's still going to be mobile. He's still going to be, but he's not going to have the same, scramble Kyler traditional tendencies, because he's not going to trust that knee a whole lot, right? And he's kind of tiny. He's a little bit bigger than me. So he's not, the linemen are huge. So it's tough to see over them. Sometimes you got to scramble a little bit to see. But I mean, I think Hollywood has a very tough matchup this week, but whenever after this week, I think Hollywood's a great play. I think McBride's going to be a fantastic play. I think James Conner will be back probably in the next 2 weeks, even though we don't really know what's going on. Michael Wilson is banged up with a shoulder. I do not expect him to play. Neither DeMercado. He's going to be out with a turf toe.
Yeah, he's already been ruled out.
Yeah, but in general, I think Kyler is a sneaky play. Obviously he loses a lot of his rushing ability, which impacts him. But this dude is one of 5 or 6 fantasy quarterbacks that averages over 20 points a game. Like, this dude is a stud. I know he gets, his issues with playing video games or whatever, but the dude's a baller. I mean, that's it. There's no question about it.
Do you have any concern, like typically coming back from ACL a lot of times, and maybe it's just running backs, but there's always seems to be a hamstring injury that pops up from, like, maybe they're compensating.
We might see that a little bit. They were really smart with him. They were really smart with Kyler. So look, we're in week 9. I mean, think about it. Both running backs this year started in week 1 post ACL. Last year, both 2 or 3, I forgot how many there were, all started early on, right? Within the first 4 weeks or 5 weeks. So, and think about it. Those guys are cutting, zigging, zagging, in the trenches. This guy's not going to be doing that. Maybe he does that a couple times, but so the grind and the stress on the knee is completely different. But yeah, overall, I actually I think I got him in the Scott Fish Bowl. And it was kind of funny because if he doesn't play this week, I don't think I have another quarterback because I think my other one's on bye. But it's okay. It's what it is. But in another league that applies. But, if not, we'll see. But I think he comes back in the next 2 weeks. And I think he's going to surprise people at how good he looks. And we just kind of forgot how good he was. He doesn't have Hopkins, but I think he still has the potential to make his weapons shine. Yeah.
So 2 more quarterbacks left. Justin Fields has got a right throwing thumb dislocation.
Yep.
How do you expect that to affect him?
So this one's a little tricky because we don't know the specifics. Throwing down dislocation is a big deal. That does not happen, okay? We went back in our injury history. There's only one player that had this for a quarterback, and it was Jared Goff. He had it. He had surgery on it the next day, and he played, I think, 2 weeks later, but it was only because the quarterback got injured and he had to pretty much go. And then he played the following week. It was in the playoffs. And then he played the following week. And even then he wasn't very good, but I think they lost, but this is when he was with LA. But so this is not a common injury. This is not this is a serious injury, very serious injury. So this is usually, it's one of three joints, 1, 2, or 3, right? These are the 3 thumb joints. This would be ideal. I don't think there was that one because it's not very common. It was probably this one, which is the not most concerning, but most annoying. This one would have been season ending. This one, he wouldn't have had a choice. He would have had to have had it, likely. But when you say dislocation, usually you're going to pop this way, right? Or either way, one of the 2 ways. But in order to do that, you have to tear the ligaments that are holding it in place. Not these ones. There's ones on the side. They're called the collaterals. Those are probably fine. Usually you tear it this way. So that means that you had to at least partially tore if the bone was truly parallel with the other one. It's not going to be perpendicular because it would have been a fracture. But in that regard, that takes time to not only heal up and swell up and create some scar tissue, but now you're asking him to catch and squeeze the ball. And maybe he landed on it. Maybe he lands on it, and that's my concern. They call him doubtful this week. I think they play on Thursday next week, so I wouldn't be surprised if they try to be sneaky and play him next week. But my concern is not so much his throwing ability right now, because he's had basically almost 20 days to rehab, so he should really not have a whole lot of swelling. But it's going to be, hey, what happens when he hits his thumb on a helmet like Stafford just did? What happens when he runs the ball and he does this? And then his thumb possibly dislocates again, right? That's my concern. So can he last 3 plays? Can he last 10 plays? Can he make it the whole game without having any issues? Because he can't wear a big brace or anything to hold the ball. Like he has to have the touch, right? So that's the tricky part about this. I was a little surprised they didn't put him on IR, but they have the luxury of seeing him and knowing his exam and whatever. And this Sunday will be 3 weeks. Usually this is a 3 to 6 week injury, closer to 6 if they need surgery, sometimes even longer. So they have a bye a little bit later. So maybe they didn't, but I don't know. This could go either way. I just don't trust them completely yet. Obviously throwing, running is a different story, but nonetheless, I think he could play this week. I think it's unlikely. I think week 10 is probably a little bit more realistic, but even then I want to see him make it through a game without re-injury. And even then I'm going to be holding my breath. But yeah, best case scenario, he does fine. He does fine and he comes back and it's like nothing ever happened. It's probably unlikely, but that's always a possibility.
So here's the last one for the quarterbacks. Popped up on the injury report this week with an AC shoulder sprain. Now, he's expected to play, and I fully expect him to play. But the reason I added him to the list is doing this show every week. Like I've noticed a lot of AC sprains popping up on the list this year, more so than any other year. Can you explain exactly what an AC sprain is and how this affects the quarterback?
Oh yeah. So this is the same type of injury that ended Anthony Richardson's season, unfortunately. So the shoulder complex has basically 2 joints. So you have the glenohumeral joint over here. We're not really talking about that one. And then you have your acromioclavicular AC joint right here. So now your AC, the A stands for acromion, which is the tip of the shoulder right here. And then the C stands for clavicle. So the clavicle is this bone, your collarbone, that runs from your sternum all the way across. Now, the problem with the AC joint is that there's a bunch of ligaments that hold it together. It's kind of floating, and then the ligaments kind of hold it. So whenever you throw, the ligaments kind of sustain and allow that movability of that joint. Well, in an AC sprain, usually you land directly on your shoulder onto the ground, despite wearing shoulder pads. I know it's weird, but it's still, despite, they still injure it. The higher the number, because these are what we call types, not grades, like a traditional grade. So there's usually 6 types. Type 1 is the most common and the mildest, but it is not mild. It is still very painful. Grade type 2s, or this one's more like a grade 2. Type 2s are pretty bad. They're 3 to 4 weeks, 5 weeks. These are painful injuries. Grade 3s, which is what Richardson had, in a regular non-throwing quarterback would have been 4 to 5 weeks easily. 50% of grade 3s do not heal, and they end up having surgery. Now, add this to the fact that Richardson, just since we'll continue with his injury, had 1 or 2 of these in high school. And they actually showed this graphic on Around the Horn on ESPN. And it was cool because people actually get to appreciate, well, how does an injury from 6 years ago or whatever it is, 5 years ago, impact him now? Well, the problem is that ligament, if he sprained it back then, never is the same. We only heal at a rate about 85%. So the problem is that tissue is only 85%. And you have scar tissue, and you have, and the scar tissue is weaker and less flexible and more prone to injury. So when you add all those together and you land on that shoulder again, that tissue is easier to tear. And when Richardson landed on it, he popped that thing and pretty much moved and tore all the ligaments in that top of the shoulder. And that's why he wasn't coming back, because with a throwing athlete in his rookie season of a stud, elite player, it's too risky to say, oh, let's hope they all hold it down. Like, it's just too risky. So he'll be fine week 1. I'm not overly concerned. But unfortunately, this struggle is real. For Allen, this is the second time he's re-injured it in 3 weeks. And he's going to continue to re-injure it until he has his bye, or not re-injure it, but he's going to be at increased risk for injury. Is it going to affect him? A little bit. But the kid's a stud. I mean, he's just going to play through it. This is who he is. But it will impact him, and I would not be surprised if they lose this game.
So I wouldn't be surprised they lose the game either. I actually have them losing in my own personal pick'ems. So I wouldn't be surprised they lose them either. Is this the same injury that Josh Allen had last year? I know. I can't remember what he was dealing with.
I believe
last
so.
year.
I have to look at his injury history, but yeah. This is very common. These are super common. Most of the time, they don't even really report them. I mean, sometimes you have to, but a lot of players deal with these. This is a little bit different than Debo, or we think it's different than Debo's. Let's put it that way. But you got to have to think about what the athlete is doing with that shoulder.
Yeah.
Right. So each athlete, each position is different, right? You're asking the quarterback to use this arm with velocity, touch, and throw on crazy angles. Less than a week after injuring it again. Like, this is tough. There's only so much steroids can help. I mean, they don't do everything perfectly.
Yep. All right. So another guy we found out today is going to be out. It's Dameon Pierce from the Houston Texans. Got an ankle injury, moderate lateral or high ankle sprain. How long do you think? How long do you expect him to be out for?
So this is a surprising injury. We did not hear about this at all, and if we did, I missed it. And there's obviously a lot of injuries; it's easy to miss one. But I did not know about this injury until 2-3 days ago. There was no it's something to monitor, Sunday afternoon. Like, no, this was news. He had already been losing workload. He had a knee injury last week, so there may be a connection here. And remember, he lost a lot of his workload to Singletary. So we're like, maybe he's just getting phased out. But no, he's injured. So he didn't practice at all this week. He was ruled out, obviously. So when I hear that, it's not a mild ankle sprain. Mild ankle sprains are not a big deal. These guys play through them all the time. So that means it's either, and when I say mild, that means a lateral classic ankle sprain. That means it's either a moderate type 3s or severe or rare. They're not common, so it's unlikely to be that. And then obviously we deal with high ankles pretty much all the time. Medial or inner ankle injuries are really rare, pretty difficult to do. That's what Michael Thomas had from his crazy injury a couple years ago. But in general, they're a big deal. So it's unlikely to be that because of the way you do it. But that begs the question, like, how long is he really going to be out? Did he just tweak it? We don't know. We have no information for this one. So unless I see video of exactly what it was, we might not see him for a month. It's possible. It may be just annoying enough for him to sit out this week and be back next week, because you kind of have each way. But at this point, unless you're in a really deep league, he might be droppable. Like even when
hasn't
he's
been
healthy,
good.
he hasn't been very good, which is unfortunate because he was incredible last year.
Speaking of somebody who's been very good, Kenneth Walker III, he's got a calf strain. Hopefully it's a grade 1. You got him down as a 15 to 20% re-injury chance. Talk about the calf strain.
Yeah, so we got lucky here. He ended up playing, didn't really miss a beat, but he did get, the volume dropped pretty significantly.
Yeah.
And Sharp came in, looked really good. I didn't watch a whole lot of this game, but I did see some, and the stats, and coach was impressed with him. So, there's a little concern there. Obviously, they brought Sharp in for a reason, and they brought in kind of like Penny and Carson a couple of years ago. I don't think they want to be a bell cow type of thing. They just have been so far. But so I have some concerns that Walker's going to be in more of a timeshare. The calf injuries are awful. We've seen Joe Burrow deal with one for basically half the season. And now this is on a running athlete that's cutting. But I'm not super concerned to the point where I'm saying sit him, but he unfortunately, you need to keep an eye on this one. If you say, hey, he tweaked it, would not be surprised at all. These are notorious for injury. Very, very, very common to re-injure these.
All right. And I had to add this one, and there's absolutely no biases or anything with this one. The people were demanding that I ask about Devon Achane. Excuse me. He's got a right knee, the grade 2 MCL. They did put him on IR. I believe he's eligible to come back after the bye week. The question that we want to know is, will he look like he did prior to the right knee injury? On the field, will he be able to perform the way he did prior to the knee injury?
Yes, I believe he will. He was actually practicing this morning. There's a video of him. I don't think he went with them to Germany.
No, I think he did.
Did he?
I think he did.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not positive, but I
maybe
think
just for the PR, obviously not playing, but maybe just because it's a cool trip, right? I mean, I think they were being super careful with him. We don't know details. That's why it's more of a speculation on my part. If it was just a grade 1 MCL, they might have held him out and put him on IR, but that's kind of aggressive. So my suspicion, it was more of like a grade 2, and grade 2s can incorporate a little meniscus. And I remember when initially they're commenting on that, they were like, trying to figure out what this was looking at. So that's why I said, you know what, there may be a little bit of meniscus involved. I'm not super concerned. He's ridiculously efficient. And I don't know if that's realistic to repeat, but kind of reminds me of Pollard, and what he was doing last year or 2 years ago or whatever. So, do I think 25 points a game is repeatable? Probably not. I mean, maybe, but that's pretty friggin' insane, especially at the volume that he was getting. It's not even just getting 25 touches a game or 20 touches a game. He's getting 12.
10 to 12 touches, putting up monster points.
Yeah. So, I mean, is it possible? Yes. Is it, I expect, I think Mustard is still going to be there. I think Wilson will probably be there in some capacity. But I think we see him back in a couple weeks. And then it'll be interesting to see, does Waddle take a dip again? Does Mustard take a little bit of a deeper dive? What do they do at JWJ? We're not going to see a whole much of a change from Tyreek. But I do think he'll be back. When these guys go on IR, I really don't update their stuff because we don't really hear anything. But yeah, I think he'll be back in the next 2 weeks or whenever he's eligible. And he, if you bought him low or held on to him, he might be a nice playoff run. You might get a nice month stretch where he's just pretty sick, for what he did already.
Yep. So we got 6 players left to cover. This one you hit a little bit on earlier. You touched on Puka with the knee swelling, sprain versus a meniscal injury. So we won't really go too much into him. We'll actually skip him and we'll go to this one. Drake London ruled out for this week with a groin strain.
Yeah, so 2 things about Puka. I expect him to play just because of who he is. First of all, we don't know who's throwing to him, and second of all, knee injuries are a little risky. And he's got, if he was healthy and he was a good quarterback, okay, no concerns. But I have some concerns. If you have to sit him this week, I wouldn't blame you for it. I'll just kind of put that. Drake, unfortunately, this is a awesome matchup, but he's not going to miss it. He's not going to play it. and now that they have Heineke in there, who should be better, at least I think he's going to be better. This would have been a smash spot, but unfortunately, groin strains are awful. They're very frustrating injuries, very painful adductor strains. Grade 1s usually take about 10 to 14 days, so there's a good chance he'll be back next week. I don't remember what their bye week is, but and then after that, it obviously depends on how the quarterback situation goes, but your trade deadline's probably over with, but he could be a buy low if there is one. And the talent is there. It was more so about the throwing and the stupid, play calling and whatnot. I think this week Kyle Pitts becomes sneaky. I think Jonnu Smith probably becomes a little sneaky. Who else? Mac Hollins? Who else is there besides Bijan receiving wise?
And we've already seen they're not going to use him. So
yeah. So at this point, I have no idea this year because of because of this new quarterback. What are they going to use? But I do like London going forward. I need to wait for him to get healthy, which should be next week, and I need to see what he does this week, I think, quarterback wise.
All right, and we'll move on to Deebo Samuel from the 49ers. You touched a little bit about him earlier when we were talking about the hairline fracture.
Yeah. So this Deebo struggles to stay healthy. Unfortunately, he had a bad injury history, hamstring predominantly in college, and he had that really one crazy monster season, and he's kind of struggled ever since. And now he's got much more competition on his team for touches. I think they're on a bye this week, so that's why he can't come back this week. But this was a little fascinating. There's predominantly 3 locations for this. This is not a common injury at all. He could have dislocated his shoulder, which usually they would have told us. But when you do that, you can have a little hairline fracture in the glenoid rim, which is kind of like the rim of the shoulder right here. Kind of unlikely, but possible. You can have a fracture or hairline fracture of the clavicle or collarbone. That is the last bone to fuse in the body, so it's kind of the weakest. And then the last spot, probably the most likely, if I were to guess, is actually the shoulder blade. The shoulder blade, if you remember a couple of years ago, Josh Jacobs had a shoulder blade hairline fracture, and he was trying to push through it. All the rotator cuffs attached to the shoulder blade, so you can technically pull a piece off with it. This is a painful injury, but it's not. It's just a weird spot, so it really have to depend on where it is. Just allow the bone to reset in there. Usually takes about 3 weeks, and then after that, usually they're okay.
All right, and then Justin Jefferson, as we know, currently on IR with the hamstring. When do you expect him to be back, and will he be? I understand there's a quarterback change. We talked a little bit about Kirk Cousins before we started with he's done for the year with the Achilles. But do we expect him to be able to perform physically the same way he was prior to the hamstring injury?
So, the unfortunate thing about this situation is this is Justin Jefferson's first ever injury that we know of, ever. Obviously one that was bad enough that we had to find out about, right?
Yep.
The other thing is he lost his quarterback, right? So this is a big deal. They traded for someone that was pretty solid, but, we'll see. But Jefferson is the type that wants to break records, right? So he's not going to sit out for 6, 7, 8, 9 games or whatever it is just to be safe, right? At least I don't think he is, in my opinion. He wants to play even if the quarterback's play is suspect. Now, he should be. I think this was more of there isn't really such thing as a 1.5, but when I put my ultrasound on hamstrings, you can say, yeah, that's a classic grade 1, or that's a grade 2, and then you kind of have this in between where it's not quite as bad as a true grade 2, but it's much worse than a regular grade 1. So I kind of call those 1.5s. And those suck. Those are about 4 to 6 weeks. Those are not any easy minor injuries. So in that regard, I think he will be back when eligible. He's not going to baby this. I think he was smart about it. He's still young and athletic and a freak, so I'm not really worried about it. Wouldn't be surprised if he did some PRP or stem cells in there or something to heal it up, and sometimes the hip is involved as well. But if you remember, they have a bye, I think, in week 13. So
Yeah, I think it's
you're
week
going to get him
13
back, and you're going to lose him again for a week, and then you get him back again. Assuming
for the
he comes back.
playoffs for
But in
fantasy playoffs.
general, I think he has potential. I just don't know. I don't know when we're going to see him. Probably, I'm assuming right ineligible. And then how much volume is he really going to get? Like, is he going to get 15 targets a game? Can they sustain drives to be able to generate that much volume? That's the tough part. Is he going to be primary read? Is it going to be Hawkinson? Like, QBs have tendencies, right? It takes time to develop a rapport. So you can't just be like, oh, he's going to go back and start throwing to him. I mean, he's got him, Addison, running backs, Hawkinson. Like, it's not just one player. So this was a huge downgrade. But the talent is there, and maybe he continues as a top 10 player this year, despite suspect quarterback play.
All right, and then we got 2 players left, and then we can get you out of here. Darren Waller, he's got a distal hamstring, new location, so I'm assuming it's somewhere different than where he's previously injured.
Yep.
You guys got him out week 9. Likely, is that back week 10? I'm assuming.
I wouldn't be surprised if he missed week 10 too. Actually, so Waller gave a good, very clear answer the other day. He actually basically pointed it out physically. He said, my one in preseason, I have to look at my notes, but one of my preseason was left proximal, which basically means the butt, where it attaches to. And then this one is right distal near the knee. So the hamstring is 4 of them. There's 3 that attach medially or towards the inside of the knee, and there's 1 that attaches laterally. It's usually the lateral one, but it doesn't have to be. And then the one by the butt basically is a combination of tendons, and it's super deep. It's almost like where you sit on a chair, like that kind of ridge. And that tells me that he has at least 2 injuries, 2 locations. And remember, he had IR. He was on IR last year with a hammy. And then early on in his career, before anybody knew about him, he had another one that ended the season. So he's got a bad history of these. So yes, he was solid when he was on the field, but I don't know when he's coming back.
Would it have been better for him if he re-injured the same one that he did in the preseason, or is it better for him as a player to where it's a different injury?
It's a good question. I prefer, it's going to sound funny, but I prefer a new injury that was a grade 1 over an old re-injury that you re-injured again.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because what happens is the scar tissue then tears, and it's likely turning a grade 1 to now a grade 2 if it's an old injury. So now because the tissue's already kind of beat up, and the scar tissue is just kind of trying to hold down the fort. So now you basically re-injured it and made the original injury worse. So whereas if you just have a brand new grade 1, you're like, it's not that bad, but it's obviously enough to hold me out, and it's new, fresh tissue that wasn't, scarred up and banged up. So ideally you don't want either, but I guess if you have to pick your poison, you'd probably want a new minor one as opposed to a re-injury to an old one.
Okay. And the last one we got here in the wasteland that we know as tight ends, Logan Thomas, who's actually he's been okay for you this year. But the heel bruise and the contusion, what can you tell us about that?
We see these every once in a while. These are kind of funny. They're painful. They're annoying. Not a whole lot you can do for them. Usually it's not plantar fasciitis. Usually it's not an Achilles. It's really just a heel bruise. I don't even know how the hell you get them. Like, it's just a weird spot. But they can be painful. These guys usually play through them. They have a great matchup against my Patriots. So I expect him to play. He'll probably be a top, 8 to 12 tight end this week, somewhere around there, unless he gets in the end zone, and then he'll probably be a top 5.
That's basically most tight ends. That's where he's been falling for most of the year anyway, is between 8 and 10. So those are the guys we wanted to talk about. Let's go ahead and get out of here. It's a Friday night. I know you got things to do. I know I got things to do. If you want, go ahead, take a moment again to go ahead and plug all your work, where people can follow you, where they can get your information, where they can support everything that you do.
So I do stem cell or PRP, different types of injections. So if anybody has a shoulder, knee, hip, spine, whatever, ankle. This is what I do. I see some of your favorite players often, so unfortunately not covered by insurance, but it is very effective, and it's actually treating the injury as opposed to band-aiding it. If you injury content, you can find pretty much everywhere. Twitter is my primary. TikTok and YouTube is available too. And then some of my other interests include anti-aging and anti-inflammatory, which I have a new line coming out for. Looks like this, or at least the current bottle looks like this. And then I dabble in some Lyme and some other stuff that fascinates me. So just trying to stay busy and use football as a friendly pastime.
Awesome. Again, you can check out Dr. Jesse Morse on Twitter at Dr. Jesse Morse. You can follow all the content at the Fantasy Doctors. Again, Dr. Morse, greatly appreciate your time this evening. Absolutely enjoy having you come on. You came on last year, came on this year, obviously. Dropped a whole bunch of great information. Greatly appreciate it. Title Tribe, thank you guys for tuning in. Follow this man on all of his socials. You will not regret it. With that, I say, have a great evening.